In the last video, we started coding C++ in REPL. We introduced some new topics. We have this main section between the opening and closing bracket, which is our program. This is where C++ will read the instructions and execute them, starting here and ending here. We had variables, where we allocated space for different values. In this case, we used whole numbers called integers. We used output to the console so that we could tell something to the user, and we read in from the console where the user would type something in and we could store it in a variable. So these basic concepts are also applied to Arduino, but in a little bit of a different way. Instead of reading input and showing output via the console, in Arduino we do it with devices that are connected. So if we go back to Tinkercad, we have a look here. I've started to set up a circuit. We've got ground connected to the ground railing. We have an LED with a short leg connected to ground via a resistor. Now if we just wanted this LED on all the time, I could connect the long leg of the LED to 5 volts. But what we're going to do is we're going to look at writing a program in Tinkercad that controls the light going on and on. We're just going to do a program called Blinky where the light will blink on and off. So rather than connect 5 volt, we'll use one of these pins. I'll just use pin 8, but it could be any of these digital pins here. So if I connect pin 8 to the long leg of the LED, I can now in my program control port 8, or pin 8, to run a current through when I want to have the light on, and to not be running electrical current when I want the light off. So let's go click on the code button. And you'll notice there's a slight difference. If I go back to REPL, I had the main function, which was my program that would get run. Here we have two different functions with different names. In Arduino, we want to do things over and over and over again. It's constantly reading from different inputs and writing to different outputs. So rather than a main, we have a loop function. And that gets run over and over and over again. It will run the code in here, and then as soon as it's finished running that code, it'll immediately run it again and continue to run it. But to begin with, we have this setup function where we can set up our board, set up any information we need before the loop begins. Okay, so if we go back again into REPL, we can see we've set some variables. And if I go back to Tinkercad, where I'd set the variables is at the top here. Now there are a couple of things I'll need to know. One, I'll need to know the LED pin that we're using, and I will set that to 8 because that's the pin that we're using on the board. So that's some information we need. And when we're making the light blink, basically what we do is we turn the power on, we wait a certain amount of time, and then we turn the power off and we wait a certain amount of time. We repeat doing that. So what I'll do is I'll create another variable again, and I'll call that wait time. So that's how long we wait with the light on or off between blinks. Now the time is measured in milliseconds, so that is 1000 milliseconds per second. So if I want to have the light on for half a second, I'll say that's 500 milliseconds. Okay, so I've got the information I need there. In my setup, I need to do a special thing in setting the pin 8. So all these pins here, I can read information in from a device in Arduino, or I can write out to a device. In this case, I want to send power out of that pin. So what I need to do is set the pin mode for the LED pin, so that's the pin that we're using, and I want to set it to be an output pin. So we could have either an output pin or an input pin. So this is the way we set up our input and output in Arduino. Back in our regular C++ function, our output was the cout for the console, and our input was inputting from the console. In Arduino, we have all these different pins, and we can use them as either input or output. So in this case, I'm saying LED pin, which is what I'm going to be using here, is on 8. So if I move that wire somewhere else, let's say I moved it over to 10, I could just change this number here and all my code will still work. Now this loop is where the program actually runs. So this will get run over and over and over again. So what I'll do is, the first thing I'll do is I'll light up that LED on port 8. And the way I do that is I call a function called digital write. I tell it which pin I want to use, so in this case it's the LED pin, and if I set that to high, that means I'm going to power it on. So I'm going to turn the LED on. And the next thing I want to do is I want to wait for a while with that LED being on. So how long do I want to wait? I want to wait for the time I allocated above, the wait time. So I'll turn the LED on, I'll wait 500 milliseconds, and then I'll use the digital write again on the LED pin, and I'll set it to low, which means there won't be power going through it. And then lastly, I'll delay again for the same amount of time. Now let's see if our program runs and blinks the LED. Okay, so the LED is now blinking on and off. In the next video, we'll extend this code to have 2 LEDs and have them each flashing on and off like a set of sirens.